Hey everybody, tacticangel here, back on the PlayStation 4, playing some World of Warships Legends. We're back to talk about yet another premium ship. This time it is the Charlemagne, the Tier 6 French cruiser. As usual, we're going to start out with a little bit of history, we're going to move into analysis, then stats, and finish off with gameplay. I have left an index down below, which may be a little truncated because there's not too much to talk about in terms of history, so let's just jump right into it. In terms of history, there's nothing really to say here. The Charlemagne is a planned sister ship for the Charles Martel, which sits at Tier 7 in Legends. The Charlemagne was intended to be one of 6 ships built in the Saint Louis class of heavy cruisers, but none of the ships were ever started, much less completed. So this is another one of those sort of what-if ships, a paper ship, or at least it's a paper ship. As for the Charlemagne's appearance in the game, kind of a curious thing. The ship is painted in a manner somewhat similar to the Kidd or the Alabama, and that's somewhat confusing because you start to create narratives in your head about why that might have been, and I suppose you might start with something like this. The French actually built the ships, and the ships were at Mers el-Kebir, and that Admiral Darlan decided not to be willfully incompetent and stupid as he was. And the ship sailed to America, either in keeping with the British demands for neutrality or the German demands for neutral internment. And upon reaching the United States, and when the United States entered the war, the Americans painted the ships and did nothing in terms of refitting them, like upgrading their AA suite. Or maybe, like the Montcalm, which is the ship, of course, that the La Galissonière permanent camo is based, after the Vichy government gave up its fleet. In any case, I understand why the Tech Tree ship may not have the Montcalm's AA complement after being refitted by the United States, but I can't figure why the Charlemagne exists in this fashion. Why does it matter? Does it matter at all? Well, no, not really. It's just one avenue I went down while trying to figure out what this ship is all about. I suppose the long and short of it is that I don't find the ship to be particularly bad in terms of its overall capacity to do damage to the enemy, but I do find it frustrating to play overall. Essentially, my opinion of this ship is that while it is capable of doing a significant amount of damage with 203mm cannons, it is unable to really carry matches, and unless you're playing with someone else in the same division, that's kind of a problem, because what you run into is a lot of situations where you can get easily singled out and deleted from the game. I find this somewhat frustrating, in part because when I look at the ship, I see a French ship equipped by the Americans, but I see no other indication that this was a French ship equipped by Americans. And while I'm happy that this isn't an overpowered ship by any stretch of the imagination, I am a little sad that it didn't reach any sort of unique identity in Legends, so it's just kind of another cruiser, and really not that great of a cruiser unless you're really into these French ships. As we start to look at the stats, what we're going to do is I'm going to try to compare this to the other French ships that are in the game right now. So we'll be looking at the Tier 6 Tech Tree equivalent, the Algerie, and for the fun of it, I guess we'll also talk about what the Tier 7 stock Charles Martel looks like. As I'm doing these comparisons, keep in mind I'm going to use the same commander on all 3 ships, and that is going to be André Lemonnier. You can see my loadout right here, so all of the stats that you're going to see are modified by what you're seeing on the screen. And in case you're wondering, I'm going to just compare what the ships look like between the Tier 7 and the Tier 6 versions of the Saint Louis. Here we have the Charlemagne, here we have the Charles Martel, the Charlemagne, the Martel, etc. It doesn't matter. Here we go. Stats. So first we're going to look at survivability. The Charlemagne has 30,000 hit points, which is solidly about 5,000 hit points less than average for the level. The Algerie comes in at 35,600, and even relatively delicate ships like the York have more hit points than this. Nominally on paper, the Charlemagne has more armor than the Algerie, But without an armor viewer, I'm not exactly sure where this armor is because I'm not sure I've ever bounced a shot in this ship. I find actually the Algerie a little bit better at taking shots off the side of the ship if you're at a decent angle. The Charlemagne seems to get hit and penetrated pretty much every time. In terms of overall torpedo protection, the Algerie, Charlemagne, and a stock Charles Martel are exactly the same. Now, all three of these ships do use similar guns. You are looking at 203mm cannons. The Algerie has a very minor range advantage and also reload advantage. Its turrets rotate faster, it does more damage, it has 1% more fire chance, and does exactly the same amount with armor penetrating shots. The Charlemagne has characteristics significantly more similar to a stock Charles Martel, but it is still slower in terms of its reload, fire percentage, and HE damage. In terms of torpedoes, these ships have exactly the same torpedo complement. They are one triple launcher on either side of the ship. They shoot out to 10 kilometers. At 60 knots, they're not exactly fast. They reload at 90 seconds and do 15,800 damage. Overall, a nice trick to have, particularly to help discourage other people from getting too close to your ship, which is something you definitely don't want. For AA protection, the Charlemagne is actually relatively well protected compared to the other two ships that I said I would compare it to. That said, it's really not all that important, and to shine in this category, at least at this point, is really not much of a win at all. As we move into maneuverability, you are looking at doing about 33 knots. I wouldn't count on it. It kind of takes a while to get up to that 33 knots, even with the engine modification. You are a half a knot slower than a stock Charles Martel. However, you are 1 knot faster than the Algerie. In terms of turning circle, you're looking at 690 meters, which feels pretty terrible. And you have a very slow rudder. And this value that you see on my screen is actually with the rudder shift mod. For concealment, the Charlemagne is ever so slightly the most stealthy of the three cruisers. You're looking at a maximum sea detectability with this configuration of 11.1 kilometers, and obviously that drops significantly while you're in smoke, or from the air, or your minimum range of guaranteed acquisition. So we're going to finally jump into a little bit of gameplay here. Here we are trying to spawn in on north. Obviously, I'm going to be in this Charlemagne. Starting in the middle of the map, we're going to go ahead and move ourselves towards the west, just because I find I usually have the most luck there. One of the things that you do need to be aware of when you're playing this ship is how detectable it is. Obviously, you can see that ring stretching out to be. I'm not immediately in any threat unless I start shooting at stuff. But once you start shooting at stuff, then obviously that's going to increase your sea detectability, your air detectability, etc. I don't particularly want to get shot, so I'm probably not going to shoot at anything until I get into position. And you can blame this on whoever you want. My guess is it's probably equal parts my fault and the other guy's, I don't know, 60-40, 40-60. It doesn't really matter. But it happens. I run into people just like anybody else. So there you see, I'm just trying to get a feel for, is this guy moving forward or backwards? I switch over to the torpedo view for just a second. One of the big advantages of having torpedoes, being able to do that. Now we're getting shells out on that Gneisenau. And we're following that in with our shell follow view, mostly or entirely because I use preset number 2. I'm using X to follow those in. If you use one of those presets that allows the shell follow view, you will have to sacrifice the gun cam. But you do get the overview cam. So, I mean, it's just a question of preference. Here we are, just kind of waiting for this Nuremberg to come around. I'm going to try to spank him with some AP. It looks like he should be moving as fast as possible across this. He's not, which is somewhat surprising. We're going to go ahead and adjust to that, and hopefully those shells will be a little bit more lucky. We actually do a pretty good amount of damage to him, considering he's moving away, and we actually hit more than a couple of times. Now we're back on to the HE. We land 3 more shots. Yeah, we're up to 8,000 damage. Not a whole lot there, but we do have a target-rich environment around us. And since we're playing this fairly aggressively, particularly for this type of ship, we definitely have a couple of ships in range. Now I'm putting HE in on that Gneisenau. If I can set him on fire like I have there, I can contribute more to the damage, and it's really one of the things that the French cruisers are good at. Obviously, at this point, I'm trying to hit him in the bow so I can set him on fire that way. Now that he's put that out, I'm adjusting my aim back towards the main part of his superstructure in hopes to catch him once he's off cooldown, set him on fire again, and start to do a lot of damage over time. So we do finally get to land that shot where we have the fire set on his ship. We see a King George out there, trying to get a feel for what the King George is doing in terms of its speed. I once again rely on that torpedo view, and pretty nice shot there, really. One of the nice things about those torpedoes. So we do manage to actually hit the King George. He puts out the fire, but I've switched over to AP. There you can see really the kind of damage you can expect against most battleships. I have a recording where I shoot several broadsides at an Iowa to no avail. Unfortunately, this ship is just not all that great at actually citadeling battleships. You can do a lot of damage to cruisers, and if you're like really suicidally close, then sure, you could probably sneak some shells through the side of a battleship. Ooh, those are ugly. Those are some ugly shots. We're going to try to steal just a little bit more damage here before he rounds the corner. We notice that an Atlanta is there. That's not super. Obviously, we don't want to draw too much attention from the Atlanta. As a lightly armored cruiser, he will chew me up in terms of hit points. He'll probably set me on fire several times. So we're just going to go ahead and let him do what he wants. And if we can get him in a slightly more vulnerable position, then that will be good for my team. Now, thankfully, we have a lot of people over here at A. And hopefully they can push into A and actually take him out without making me come back and take care of it for them. But at this point, I'm headed over towards B just to make sure that the enemy doesn't try to capture B, or if they do, that they're unsuccessful. We have several ships that are starting to pop up on the map. None of them are obviously within range, so I continue to sail just as fast as I can. And here you can see I still haven't quite made the 23 knots. I've gotten up to 22 or 32.9. but I just haven't gotten all the way there. And this ship bleeds a lot of speed when you turn. The other thing about turning is you can't really do it quick enough to actually actively dodge shots, which is one reason why I don't really love this ship. I really want a ship that's a little bit more responsive so that I can actually see somebody firing at me and make immediate course corrections to try to make sure that he misses. Maybe not exactly realistic, but we are playing a video game. And the whole point of that is to try to win. So we follow those shells in there with the shell follow view. That's on preset 1 or 2. We do manage to set him on fire. Looks like he did put out that fire, which is kind of unfortunate. But we are definitely looking forward to that guy coming around the edge of that mountain. If we can possibly convince him to do that. Now you can see I'm paying attention to that Gneisenau now in hopes that he comes forward. I could shoot shells. I could launch torpedoes. At this point, I don't think he's spoiling for a fight, so he's playing it pretty conservative. Now this Gneisenau is going to be looking for a fight, though. He's got the fire on him already. We get a decent amount of damage there. You can see just how casually a ship like that can hit you and just do a ton of damage. Obviously, he probably punched my Citadel with a lucky shot into the side. How lucky that is? Honestly, not that lucky. It happens a lot in this boat. And I nose in towards him just so that he can't delete me quite as easily. Now we're going to take a hard turn, leave him with a couple of final parting shots. He's on fire. He probably is not going to be able to get rid of that after burning his damage control. He actually does, which means he's definitely burned his damage control, and he's a couple seconds away from that. We managed to clip him with one torpedo, which honestly not too bad. As you can see with the Charlemagne, the torpedo angles on this are pretty nice. Not exactly the fastest torpedoes, but clearly they can do the job if you play them right. Now the unfortunate thing is I'm going to just sail up between these two islands and ram one of them. But it offers me a little bit of opportunity to address the things that I feel are a little not great about this ship. The type of person who might enjoy it. I stick by the idea that if you're going to enjoy this ship, you probably play in a division a decent amount, and that you know that you can count on your division mates to help you out. Certainly the Charlemagne is not an underpowered ship, at least in terms of its main battery, and you can do a lot of really good work with it. My problem has been significantly when I get to the end of the match and I'm one of two people maybe who are still alive, and when everybody who's left is shooting at you, you can run into situations where you actually take a lot of damage pretty quickly. The ship is easy enough that American destroyers and maybe even British destroyers are going to be able to ride up beside you and actually citadel you. And then, of course, I'll briefly address the game that we're seeing in front of us. I am just driving into B when the game ends. The game ends because essentially the enemy team got zeroed out. So victory for us. Not really a question there. There you can see us on the top of the list with a little bit under 2,400 experience. And then in terms of what does the Charlemagne earn, there we earn around 300,000 with our premium time and the 10% flag. So you can do your math to figure how you would do. In any case, I hope you found this video informative, and I'll see you guys on the next one.